Jamie Rad is upstairs. Marianne Loafman is part of our team, and Marianne is doing something we haven't done here before, but there's been a lot of requests over the last few years to record these sessions and make them available on YouTube. So we are trying to do that for the first time. Be patient with us, but we hope to get them up on the First United YouTube channel this week. I think everybody knows Phil Gray, our pastor. And Chris Damon is a liaison, and Catherine Heavey is here. So they're also a liaison to our team. So the guests this morning are Deputy Chief Jacobson from the Oak Park Police Department and our village president, Vicki Skaman. They need no real introduction, but I asked them to send me a little bit of a bio just to get an idea of, their background, and boy was I impressed. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Vicki, and then I'm going to shut up and let them present, and then there'll be time for questions. Village President Skaman has been in public service for over 20 years, and she's worked with small businesses as well as nonprofit management, policy research, and public service. She was elected as the Oak Park Village President in 2021 and was the village clerk for 4 years before that. She's known for her collaborative approach to issues and involving the entire community, in both public and private, for promoting diversity and for regional sustainability planning. This is not all of the things, these are not all of the things that she does, but just a few examples of her public service over the years. Chair of the Liquor Control Board, board member and co-chair of Women in Business, co-chair of Addictive Recovery Team, sitting president of the Proviso Mayor's Caucus, executive team and chair, Law Control Review Board, which promotes equitable diversion strategies for young offenders. She has a Bachelor of Fine Arts from University of Illinois at Chicago. Oak Park Police Chief David Jacobson began his career at the Oak Park Police Department 29 years ago, initially with the Patrol Division. He was there for 3 years before he started getting promoted, and he has been promoted multiple times. He is now officially, as of 2023, the rank of Deputy Chief, overseeing investigations, community policing, and records. And Dave Jacobson has a bachelor's degree from Western Illinois University. And by the way, as a former high school counselor, I can tell you they have a really great reputation for their criminal justice program. And public safety, Northwestern University's Center for Public Safety Staff and Command. So those are our presenters today. I'll let you all get started. If you don't want to be on camera, I think you all know to sit behind the camera. Okay. Get this on.
So I presume that for the recording, it's better that we use the microphone?
Please.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you very much for having me, for having both of us. I wonder if maybe, David Jacobson, you've got more of a formal Deputy Chief presentation, or no, or just should we go ahead and get started? Okay, all right. And so I was part of a group of local residents and local leaders that went to Rockford, Illinois back in 2015, where they reached a homelessness zero. Now their population was at the time largely veteran, so they were able to lean in on other programs. But the model that we learned from launched our homelessness coalition today. Many of those folks that went on that day had been involved for some time, but it formalized the approach that we were looking to develop. And that was really to have an approach of knowing each person who's homeless in our community's name and working to understand the story of what brought them to where they were. And so you heard that at one point I was the founding co-chair of an organization called the Addiction Recovery Team. That was through the Community Mental Health Board and my work at the township. And that is also about creating a climate in our community of those who are returning from recovery to feel accepted and to feel as if we don't have to have alcohol or other drugs everywhere, but have an empathetic kind of response to their return to our community. And these, I mentioned this, not that it's directly related, but the experience that I have in working with all of our partner agencies around homelessness. A lot of the messaging that you're going to hear from the Village of Oak Park moving forward, I think, is front of your mind. And that is that we as a community are really very philanthropic and we're very giving, but we really do need to understand the importance of giving our resources to those nonprofit agencies that are best suited to help the homeless, rather than respond to the panhandling that is on the street. As long as our homeless, who are there for many different reasons, and everybody's story is different, okay, that as long as they're able to self-sustain by panhandling on the street, then they're not going to seek the services that they need. We are extremely lucky as a community to have, and it was a resident of our community that started Housing Forward with her mission, and then that grew into a multi-million-dollar nonprofit agency that serves 18 zip codes. We, in Housing Forward, we're very lucky to have the Way Back In. It has a group home that's now expanded to a second residence in the Village of Oak Park for people in recovery. There's also a similar home in Maywood. We have the partners to be able to work together to solve this challenge. But we also need to expand beyond our borders. Because as long as Oak Park operates as a bubble, then we are going to be, in my opinion, and this is where you're going to hear some differences of where I get to speak as an independent elected official, but I'm very, very supportive of and leading with our staff on the strategies that we use, okay? But we are a bit, as long as we need to work with our neighboring communities so that we're expanding those housing opportunities. And we're expanding the response that is needed. And I mean, some communities don't have some of the advantages that we have. I can talk a lot about funding sources. And what ends up happening then is that they bring their homeless to Oak Park. And because they don't have the resources to address the challenges. And so you also heard in my bio that I am currently the president of the executive committee of the Proviso Mayor's Caucus. Okay? We're not even in Proviso. And I was asked by my peers to be the president of that because of the relationships that I'm building and the way that I show up so that we can expand our bubble and bring resources to the greater region and work together to respond. Otherwise, we're going to continue to need to fund into these challenges that I know we, have a big heart for that response, but we can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. And we need to be, working with like our library, who takes a lot of the burden every day of the homeless who then go into the facility and provide the support so that the residents of Oak Park can enjoy our community. And so I think that we'd like to open this up to be able to have questions as we go, but maybe I'll quickly turn it over to Deputy Chief Jacobson and how he might introduce the topic.
So the main topic that we're here to discuss today is homelessness and what to do about homelessness as a community. But what makes this issue in and of itself so difficult to navigate is there are a lot of other issues that intersect at the issue of homelessness. Mental health, panhandling, and in the last 2 years, migrants, and the issue of migrants in our community and in America, so to speak. So where it becomes tricky for the police department is there's only so much that the police department can do to address this issue. And at the end of the day, none of these issues have anything to do with actual criminal behavior. It's not against the law to panhandle in Illinois or across America. In fact, it is considered free speech and protected as such. And time again, across the country, communities that have set up, that have passed legislation targeting panhandling have been shot down by the U.S. Supreme Court because it is considered an act of free speech. The act of asking someone for money in and of itself is not a crime, okay? Where does it become an issue for law enforcement? When it becomes aggressive. When somebody puts you in fear of your own safety. That's where it becomes a crime, okay? So somebody standing out on the corner at Lake and Marion asking for money, while, to some people that is not something they want to observe, there isn't anything wrong with that. And there isn't really anything that law enforcement can do, okay? Beyond it becoming aggressive, and if it does become aggressive in your mind, the next thing to do, if you feel as if this is impacting your safety, then you call us. Then we will respond, okay? But on a day-to-day basis, and no doubt if you've spent any time in Oak Park, in downtown Oak Park, you've come across Officer Mike Kelly, okay? He deals with this on a daily basis, all right? And you will see him talking to people that are panhandling, that are panhandling. If they're not doing anything threatening, there isn't anything that he's going to do. Now, to kind of go from there, all right, so there's the panhandling. A lot of individuals that are panhandling also are homeless, but what's important to note is not all of them. Some of them are actually panhandling because it is a means of generating income. It is how they support themselves. Some actually have homes that they go back to at the end of the day. The individual in front of Starbucks that everybody knows, he actually is not homeless. He walks home every day at around 5 o'clock, okay? We know him, he knows us. We've been able to build a relationship with him to where most of his activities are no longer illegal, and everybody knows who he is and nobody feels threatened by him, okay? But it takes time. And in addition to them, not everybody being homeless, we also have the issue of mental health, which I brought up earlier. Most individuals that are out living in the street or that are soliciting panhandling have a great distrust of law enforcement or anybody representing government, okay? And it takes time. It has taken Officer Kelly and our other beat officers who work in the downtown area. It is a slow process to build up trust and break down those barriers. Their experiences with law enforcement previously weren't necessarily positive. Most have been in and out of the criminal justice system, and so naturally they don't trust Officer Kelly when he first encounters them, and he has to build a relationship with them. He knows everybody. He makes it his top priority to get to know every individual that is in downtown Oak Park, get to know what their situation is, and to build up a dialogue with them so that he can identify how he can help them, how he can steer them towards the resources that are actually available in our community. And as President Skaman touched on, we are a very giving and philanthropic community. And the number one message that Officer Kelly would tell you, that every other officer would tell you, that I'm telling you, is that it does not solve the problem by giving somebody money out on the street. If you are interested in giving money, donate to one of our many organizations that we have in our community to help them. Because what we try to do is when we identify what each individual needs, when we get them to talk to us and get them to be interested in the resources that are available, we steer them towards those resources. We put them in connection with Housing Forward. We'll put them in connection with Thrive or with the Oak Park Homeless Coalition. We'll do everything we can to get them into those resources. But it takes time. And I know it's frustrating, and it is something that we are addressing on a daily basis. But I ask, if anything, for your patience as we go through this.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. So I'd like to kind of back up and define some of the what we've already talked about a bit. So what is the Oak Park Homelessness Coalition? The Oak Park Homelessness Coalition has membership from every sector of our community, faith-based, nonprofit, residents, small business, government, and they all have the mission of working together to address, to provide, create those systems that serve the homeless as officers like Officer Kelly work to know each independent homeless person, so that then we have the connections to facilitate, those introductions from that homeless person to the place of stable housing. Yes, it does take quite a bit of time from that first introduction to building of the trust, understanding the story, making the connections, and then working for that stability. The Right In is designed to house folks for ideally up to 3 months. So the house Right In is currently, the upper floor is owned by Housing Forward, and they're rehabbing those units as we speak. That began during COVID, when the PADS program that we're all familiar with, of having our homeless all sleep in a basement of a church overnight, we could not do that during COVID. We could not have people congregating and sleeping overnight all in one room. And so with assistance from state dollars, county dollars, and the Village of Oak Park, and philanthropic community, Housing Forward was able to purchase that building. And they operate an office out of there too, so that the folks there are constantly being worked with for their plan for housing. But you're not able to stay in the Right In until you have a plan. So the ideal is that you're there for no more than 3 months. So it's kind of at that end of that journey that we were talking about. So then as a community, we have to identify, the housing for each stage of somebody's journey. We need to have that emergency housing for, cold nights and safety, And so we're currently right now working with Housing Forward to purchase rent the Accolades building, which is a senior daycare that went vacant in 2024. And so working with the Residents Corporation and the Housing and the Village of Oak Park and Housing Forward, we're working to have that available so that we can have a space for those folks that you are seeing in downtown Oak Park more often now. And so that is currently in the works. When Deputy Chief Jacobson says that this is an ongoing conversation, it's often literally every day. When we have seen the larger encampments in downtown Oak Park, It was an everyday conversation between myself and the village manager, the chief of police, and internal working groups that the village manager would pull together, literally every day. The desire to serve and protect our small business community, as well as every resident in Oak Park, those who are homeless and those who are not, is the desire of our government and the elected officials that you have today. The challenges are endless, quite literally. This message that you're hearing today is not one that we've been hearing for all that long. It's been said in the social service network. And I stood up at the library a little over a year ago at where the Housing Forward was communicating how it is that the different models that they have, the frameworks that they have for their organization in serving the homeless, and made this statement. That provided the kind of political will to go out there now and do this. And, and as I was saying before our conversation officially started today, I have very good friends with very, very huge hearts who are still a little bit challenged by this because they want to, they see somebody in need. They see somebody with a child right there in need. And you just have to understand, in order for that person to shorten that process that we're describing, we need to please provide your funds to the nonprofit that is serving them. You're only making that process longer. As far as the migrants, so many of you are aware that we were able to successfully house over 200 migrants on a budget much shorter or much smaller than any other community that I'm aware of. And everyone is in either 6 to 12 month housing leases, largely outside of the village of Oak Park. Now that wasn't because we didn't want to see some migrants housed in community. Some churches in our community adopted a family and they are housed successfully in our community. Some are still experiencing challenges. But what we did, the model that was created in partnership with the community and the community of congregations, and some of you may be involved in that in some way, is really to try to identify apartments that are in areas of Spanish-speaking networks, so that then the Venezuelan migrants would hopefully be able to create their own support system and work to and trust for connection with the nonprofit organizations that serve those communities of where they landed. So you do still see migrants in downtown Oak Park with small children who are selling candy. Some of those migrants, I fear, are being taken advantage of and are being dropped off here in our community. Almost as if it was a business. A van pulls up, migrants are told, go to this corner, go to that corner, go to this corner. Well, I just got to tell you, if they're not able to go home that night with enough money to have made working that corner beneficial, then they're not going to keep coming back to that corner. And that's an enabling reality too. The Village of Oak Park very bravely, very empathetically, and very well responded to a crisis, to a moment, an emergency moment. None of us asked to have migrants dropped on our doorstep that night on October 31st of 2023. Yes. But we did organize and respond. We were not in the position to just send them back to the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago was not at all prepared to take them back. And our staff were talking to the city of Chicago almost daily And again, I can say things that maybe Deputy Chief Jacobson might say a little differently. They're like, please don't send them back. The city of Chicago at the time did not have the systems set up that were working. So I take great pride that with your help, we did create the systems that did work.
If I could just add on that, I can say with absolute 100% certainty that none of the migrants that were housed in Oak Park are the same individuals that you are continuing to see out on Lake Street and in other areas of the village soliciting. They, as President Skaman said, they're being brought into Oak Park because it is profitable. It has become a business. And again, it touches on that idea of if you give them money, it's a short-term solution. And so, soliciting in and of itself is, under ordinance, something that you have to get a permit for, okay? Including selling candy or Gatorade at an intersection or on a sidewalk. They're not going to get those permits. What is law enforcement going to do about it? Again, it's having conversations and getting them to understand that this is not something that you should be engaging in. It's not going to lead to anything positive for you. And we're talking about individuals that also have a very great distrust of law enforcement based on their own life experiences. What they see us in uniform most likely brings them back to their home country and how they were treated there. And so that's the challenge that we're faced with in trying to navigate that issue as well.
Okay, so now what? Okay, so Housing Forward serves 18 zip codes, as I said before, right? I think that's correct. Yes. Okay. And but they only have one task force or team that goes out there and works with the homeless. To, as you see Officer Kelly doing every day, building those relationships for trust so that he can, at times escort them to the services that they need. And so we Housing Forward, at our very last meeting of the year on December 3rd, presented to us what it would cost to expand that team. And that is ultimately something that we've needed for some time. The cost is high. When we were having the very difficult conversations about the cost of housing our migrant population, of which we received more than 90% of our funds back from the state and federal government. So the conversations I heard from my colleagues of, we didn't create this challenge. Why are we stopping everything to then respond? Again, we still count on every level of government to respond to an emergency. But through the relationships that I have from the last 20 years of serving our community, we were able to receive those funds from the appropriate place. So it trickled down from the federal government. We just created the model. And the model that, again, worked. So the investment in our traditional homeless is actually significantly higher. The cost of housing somebody is from that first step or introduction to that point of secure housing is between $17,000 and $28,000 per person. We did not spend that on our migrant population. So there's now, so then working with those neighboring communities, continuing to work with our state elected officials, of which we are very lucky to have so many that are very invested in our community and working with us to solve these challenges. We used the last year, Broadview opened up the Legacy Apartments, and that is a similar facility in that they're Our units that are also, a good number of them serve the people with disabilities. And have that office on the first floor that helps that person continue to work through those systems so that they are able to be set up for success and not finding themselves back on the street. So in the next year, you're going to see at least one more project come forward with that model. And that would be on Madison Street, close to McNeil Hospital. Location was one that I alerted Senator Don Harmon of 2 years ago as being one that was potentially a good fit because of its location close to the hospital. I've also been in the emergency room when a homeless person has been in the waiting room, quite challenging to the staff of Oak Park Rush. And, so building these plans, these systems, these programs in partnership with those people who are working every day with our homeless and know the challenges is going to help us be that much more successful when we are able to implement them. We'd like to see, so the second zip code that serves the largest number of, or has the largest number of homeless that find themselves here in Oak Park is Maywood. So I will continue to work with Maywood to identify how they can also have such a facility, and with the state and local funding that we would hope to secure. I've also had the opportunity to sit down with Senator Dick Durbin, where he learned how we responded to the migrant crisis and the systems that are required to do so. So the plan for working to be a community that is someday homeless zero, these are all moving parts that have to happen at the same time. I have my job as an elected official in building those relationships and securing that funding. Our staff and our police department have their challenges that I'll again let Deputy Chief Jacobson speak more to rather than myself. Our partner agencies and small business community have their challenges. So we will all be working on this together. Our alternative response is a key part to that. That immediately expands that on-the-street task force that Housing Forward has to have, right? And so that is not just a response of when our police department is called to respond. It's to de-escalate a situation. It's also about connecting people with the resources in our community. Just this last week, I had a young lady from the high school shadow me for a moment. And in that day, I had to drive, just for efficiency, somebody from Village Hall to the township for assistance with their electric bill. And then I drove that person to Maywood's office for Housing Forward. But I also have, because of my work within the nonprofit community, had a relationship with that person where they trusted me to help them. This alternative response, those are going to be people that are going to be able to build that relationship. So it's not just there is no way of just being tough on homelessness. It just doesn't work. And there is no place else to take them.
Right, I could add a little bit more about the alternative response team as well. It's something that we've been working on for the better part of 3 years at this point. And what I'm really excited about, and where it's always been frustrating for me throughout my career, is when you're out in the field, when you're out in the community, and you're going about your day as a police officer, and you either get dispatched to a situation or you observe one yourself. Say, over at the metro station. When I go over and I arrive on scene, I start a conversation. I try to get an idea of what the situation is. Our alternative response team is going to be out in the field. Whereas previously, if I felt like I needed somebody from Thrive to respond because there's an immediate mental health issue that is creating a danger, so to speak, and I need somebody from Thrive to help navigate and de-escalate that situation, the alternative response team is going to have that training, and they're going to be on scene immediately with me, because they're going to be police officers embedded in this as well. Okay? So it is an excellent way to deliver resources and put the resources in front of the individual in real time on scene, okay, which was not always something that we could do. And they will have training, specialized training, above and beyond what we have as police officers to also help facilitate those conversations and get the individual the help they need. So I'm really excited about it. It can't be here soon enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Is that a part of the police?
So
No,
it's
the village.
going to be the village, and we're going to be a part of it, but I don't know if we want to transition into questions at a certain point, or...
City. Yeah, we have, 9:45, I mean 10:45, so.
Okay. Okay.
So I assume it got funded, the alternative.
Phase 1 has been completely funded. Phase 1 will allow for that, a smaller team that can act as that connector, as we both have been describing. Currently, our current contract with Thrive still exists. I'll just applaud that, many of you have been, probably know as much about this as I do. The Village of Oak Park has been ahead of this for a long time. Our current model with Thrive Counseling Center, Once Family Services, is over 50 years old. We have the most crisis intervention trained officers in the greater Chicago metropolitan area. So what happens currently is when the police receive a call that they believe is mental health related, they do still go to the scene and de-escalate in the way that Deputy Chief Jacobson was speaking to. And that's where that crisis intervention training is so important. And then they call Thrive, and Thrive sends somebody to meet at the scene. Now, Thrive is very hyper-local, so we're there sometime. However, they do also see people all day long. So sometimes that response can be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but sometimes, unfortunately, that response could be 35 to 45 minutes. What phase 2 of the so phase 1 is going to have that internal team that can connect people to resources and have the follow-up to those calls, okay? The follow-up is very important to reduce that reoccurring caller, but also just, out of empathy, to do what we can to actually serve people and not just have what is on paper look good. We want to be making a difference in human lives, okay? And in partnership with the township and our other agencies. The phase 2, the money is in the budget, where the exact model of whether it's going to be a hybrid partnership with Thrive continuing and the Village of Oak Park, or if it's going to be fully village owned, is still a decision before the village board to vote on. But the dollars to support it are in the budget. And there's challenges to both. Managing, and this is me talking as an elected official now, let's be clear, okay? The proposal that is before us, that is designed by a professional staff, is for the Village of Oak Park to maintain that relationship with Thrive, but to largely have a team that we can manage. Both have challenges. Do you want me to expand on what the challenges of both models would be? Or do we have other questions?
Are you saying there are two parallel organizations? One within the government and one within Thrive?
Repeat the question, please.
Okay, and so the question is, are there two parallel organizations? So currently, it's a contract with Thrive, and we're building out this phase 1 to have internal staff. They'll continue to work with Thrive, and they'll do much of the follow-up, okay? And phase 2 is, how do we be on the scene as quickly as possible? Okay? I think that we'll always need a contract with Thrive Counseling Center. That's my personal opinion. Because as large as we feel at 55,000 people in 4.7 square miles, which is extremely dense, we don't necessarily have enough calls for 24/7 full staffing. But we do have peak hours. And so that model. All right, so my own father had passed away in 2022 of a borderline disorder, personality borderline disorder, which is a fairly serious mental health disorder. 2020, sorry. And I did have to call our own police department. I was village clerk at the time, not village president. And so an officer came to our home and he did an amazing job of keeping my father calm. And my father was at that moment using humor to try to make it seem as if maybe potentially I was overreacting to the moment. But had the officer not had that CIT training, he could very easily have decided to be aggressive instead. However, it's still just a reality that the training of an officer the priority was to keep me safe. So he's standing over my father, not over, but close to my father, as an officer would, in a professional manner. And my father's on the couch, and he says, and I'm just like, actually a little nervous, because I'm like, okay, I might have to loosen up a little here if we want to keep things, calm. And I'm like, would you like a glass of water? No, ma'am. Would you like to sit down? No, ma'am. And it did. So in some situations with personality disorders, and these are complicated moments. Okay. He could have responded very aggressively and started flipping furniture, which he was very capable of doing. And it did take Thrive about 25 minutes or so to get there. And he did end up going to Hines Hospital and was committed that day. But so that window needs to be shorter. That window absolutely needs to be shorter. And that trust, I had great trust of that officer who was in my house that day. But if you're in a home where there are trust issues with the person with a mental health disorder, or with those folks who own the home, or the residence that you're in, all of these things are just really complicated. So our goal is for that response time to be as quick as it can possibly be. And so that's kind of the question, is are we going to have the LCSWs in our police department, embedded into our police department? Are they going to be managed by us, or are they going to be managed by an outside agency like Thrive? Either way, that's our goal. My goal as an elected official, and I think what I've heard from my colleagues at the board table.
Yes, I was wondering, I went to that meeting in the library in 2023, and they passed out these little brochures. And told us, instead of giving money to someone, give them this copy of this brochure so that they know where the resources are. I tried that, and the response was, well, I can't go to food pantry because I don't have a kitchen. I can't cook my own meals. And I just said, well, you need to start talking to somebody. What you're describing is very complicated as a process, but I wondered if this is put out by the Oak Park Homelessness Coalition, and I wondered if you've evaluated, are they updated, are they available? What do you think of using this as something instead of giving money?
Yeah, you're likely going to get that response no matter what we provide for you to give in that moment. But the day hopefully would come where they're like, okay, can I have a case management officer person? Can I sit down and understand my options? It's still entirely too complicated. You know, my needing to drive that person last week to 2 different locations, that's not okay. You know, because once if you've got somebody who's deeply depressed, that's just one scenario of the many different scenarios that might lead somebody to homelessness, which does not always include a mental health or a drug addiction disorder, okay? But still, to be in that very vulnerable situation of asking for help, you need a one-stop shop, okay? And you need as little bureaucratic red tape as possible. And so the only way we can truly achieve that is by bringing it in-house. So I don't have a great answer for you on what else you could use besides that. You're not likely to ever get a great response from handing it out.
Have these been updated? Are they available?
They are available. They have only been updated to the extent of making sure the contact information and the resources that are current are on that.
Where do you get them?
The Community Mental Health Board, the Village of Oak Park, downtown Oak Park has them. You know, we really do need to increase working with our small business community. And over this last 2 years, you've seen Shannon Williams, the Executive Director of Downtown Oak Park, work to increase that relationship. She's brought me to 1 or 2 businesses to sit down and have that connection internally with the Village of Oak Park so that when they're experiencing challenges with theft or homelessness or whatever, they can get connected as well as we possibly can manage.
2 things. When we were, some of us were at a meeting at the library a couple months ago, and they were saying they were updating the cards and that they would be available in the library and other places around the town. Though, when you're saying they're updated, those things are now out? And that's question 1?
Yes.
They are, okay,
Yes.
great. Second question, could you elaborate a little bit on what is aggressive behavior? I know that there are people that no longer want to eat in the outside seating in the summer because people come up to them there and rather aggressively demand money. I sometimes have seen people who are clearly in a mental health crisis screaming obscenities to whomever is in the area. Those things are not great for our community, but these people need help. Is that a time to call the police? Can you elaborate on what's aggressive?
So when I say aggressive, it's any sort of behavior or situation that you feel as if your safety is being threatened. That's different for everybody, okay? If you feel as if you or somebody else or even the individual themselves are in some sort of danger, no matter how great or small, call us. Just call us. Call 911, okay? Get us over there and we'll figure out what to do, all right? Now, aggressive panhandling borders on potentially, at its most serious, a robbery or an attempt robbery. And that would be definitely criminal behavior. And depending on what happened and what you're interested in seeing happen afterwards, it could lead to an arrest, okay? But again, there are a lot of other issues that are going to play into that as well. But let's just keep it simple. If you think that your safety is being threatened or somebody else, call us, get us over there, and we'll go from there.
How are you going to do that when the police department is down 30 people?
Yes, well, we are in a staffing challenge. It hasn't affected our numbers on the street of officers. We are maintaining our response times. our beat coverage, our presence in the neighborhood and in the community. We're having to use overtime to do that. We're having to do callbacks, but it hasn't impacted our numbers negatively. And we're getting better. Our staffing is getting better. Over the last year, we've hired close to 25 officers. In fact, we swore in 2 more officers just Friday and 5 more officers last month. Now, the thing about that is, it takes the better part of a year from the date an officer is hired to when they're out in a squad car on their own responding to calls. They have to go to the police academy, which is anywhere from 4 to 6 months, depending on which academy they go to. And then there's our field training program, which again could easily be another 4 to 6 months, depending on how fast they transition through the levels. But we're seeing improvement with our numbers, definitely.
Well, I live on Marion Street, and I really don't feel safe often when I walk downtown. And it feels to me like the balance has now become more pro taking care of those that don't live here than the businesses and the residents of Oak Park. And my grandchildren are sometimes afraid to be downtown because of aggressive, mentally ill, and panhandling people. And I think we have to be careful not to stress everything towards helping those who don't live here and put a little more focus on our community and keeping our community healthy and our businesses healthy and our residents safe.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. And to that end, I can tell you that when the situations have occurred, arrests have been made. Okay? One of the issues that we currently are dealing with are retail thefts, particularly at businesses such as Target and Old Navy. And more often than not, when it's our homeless individuals, we'll find them over at the metro station. And it is something that we've had to address. And no, you're right. Your safety, the community safety, everybody's safety that's priority number 1 for the police department.
Deputy Chief Jacobson, I just wanted to say I also live on Marion Street, and in the last several months there have been 2 instances, one involving a mentally ill neighbor, another where I was walking down Lake Street and saw a man who seemed to be mentally ill who was knocking over, flower pots, arrangements, and, screaming and yelling. On both instances, we called the Oak Park Police Department, and the response was amazing. They were there quickly. In the first case where there was the mentally ill neighbor, there was, I guess someone from Thrive was there also to de-escalate. But I just wanted to say, thank you. And at least in my experience recently, the police department response seems to be working well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'd first like to suggest that you're probably in a room with more supportive people than might be the case. I've lived here all my life, and I've always been very proud of the government in Oak Park and the police. So we start with that. What I would like to know is there any metrics, is there any measurements as to what it was like 10 years ago, or in my case, almost 90 years ago, and
Oh, confessions.
and what it is now. In other words, if you've nicely outlined what you're all doing and totally supportive of that, but how do you measure whether the problem is getting worse or better? And then I'd like to conclude with, when I come home from downtown at 10:30 at night and have to walk through the Marion station, it's very intimidating. I've never had anything happen, but has there been incidents? You've got 5 or 6 people hanging around there, and you feel like you're walking through a gauntlet.
So are you asking have there been any
Is
incidents
Marion
at the
Street
metro?
Station a major problem?
Well, we haven't. Most of the issues we've had at the metro station have been kind of, amongst themselves, the individuals that are staying there, most of the actual criminal behavior that we would have, it's either like somebody stole from somebody else, or there's drug usage, or there is a retail theft nearby that ends up over at the metro station. But as far as commuters and others that are passing through, I'm not aware of any one specific incident that comes to mind automatically.
Well, that's reassuring. Now, what are the measurements of how serious the problem has become?
Sure.
Of
So-
housing and so on?
The presentation that we received as a village board on December 3rd does have some of the data over the years as well, and I can forward that to Marcia and have that shared with everybody. It would, also give the programs that Housing Forward is asking to increase as part of that presentation. So I imagine that would be very helpful to you all. And so all I can really do is speak to off the cuff, like the trend, okay? And so I think fairly obviously we saw a significant increase during COVID and resulting from COVID. I also want to just point out that, those PADS programs, the Village of Oak Park and Evanston were one of only 2 communities that were able to purchase a hotel and do what we did. And honestly, ours is working better. That Mayor Daniel Biss came to the Village of Oak Park and I responded to questions of him and his trustees with Housing Forward staff as to how we were operating here, that it was working better. And it was, the answer was largely the relationship with our police department and the trust between Housing Forward and our police department in that response. So there are not enough beds, period. If they're for the homeless that are on the street in the city of Chicago and the greater Chicago metropolitan area. And so there do need to be ways that we increase the number of beds. Ultimately, until that happens, we're not going to be able to move people off the street. So we can't forcing somebody out of the metro station if we don't have a place to take them. And taking them to jail is not something that we can legally do unless there is a reason to do so for community safety. I agree that it is a challenge, it is intimidating to walk through the station in that situation. Some of the folks that are remaining on the street are also doing so because they're afraid to be in the shelter. But the residents' community safety is the priority. It just legally, we have challenges of what we can do about it. Our small business community is something we're very invested in and continue to want to support. They're balancing that with human rights and empathy. Yes, but the priority still being the resident of Oak Park. There's just the reality that all of these things have to be advanced at the same time for the safety of the community at large. So that data we can share with you as much as possible. We're putting more and more of that on the website, the village website as we collect it. And also working with Metro, CTA, and the train station to, share in some of the responsibility of caring for that building. That's an ongoing challenge. I've walked the CTA station with CTA staff to identify what it is that they can do for us to make it cleaner, brighter, etc. But largely our public works staff are the ones that maintain it.
We should probably wrap it up. I don't know, can you stay for just a minute or two longer for additional question or two?
Of course.
Okay, I know some of you may have to leave. Before we conclude, I just wanted to remind people that on next Sunday, 9:45, we will have representatives from Housing Forward to elaborate from their perspective on this issue and, what should we be doing. The following week, our pastor, Phil Price, will be here talking. His title is, "What Would Jesus Do?" Not that we're elevating him quite to Jesus, but very good, so this is an ongoing discussion, and I want to be sure that everyone has a chance to thank our speakers, but you can stay around for a few minutes if you want.
Thank you so much for having us.
So just one or two more questions? Yeah.
It's just an answer.
Sure, whatever. Yeah, why don't you just speak up? Just, if you have
Well,
to.
other people might have the same question
Yeah,
too,
why
so if you're
don't you-
willing.
Just speak up.
If this is a business for the people who are selling candies, can you
Could you repeat that?
in any particular way and say you can't have a business out of it?
I hear you. I think the deputy chief, okay, so the question was, if you are treating panhandling as a business, can we address it differently within the law?
I'm especially looking at the people selling candy, because that's all over. There are these people who just, maybe they set aside up as independent contractors, but if there's one person who's, driving up in a Mercedes and picking them up afterwards, and this is not.
Right, as I started that portion of our discussion, those folks are quite likely being taken advantage of. And we do still have major changes that we need to make for our immigration policy so that we can better set people up who come here to actually contribute to society and work, to be able to do so. And those we are limited as to what we can do other than connecting them to resources. I don't know, Deputy Chief Jacobson, do you have anything that you can share about the legality of panhandling?
Right, so we're speaking specifically to those that are selling small merchandise.
That's a business, is it not?
Well, but at the end of the day, again, where law enforcement comes into play, is actually, this is a local, or it would be a local ordinance type situation. Local ordinance citations are basically parking citations. There may be one level above parking citations, one level below getting like a speeding ticket. And so to issue somebody a citation isn't going to necessarily solve the problem long term. And it's going to only be focused on that individual. And let's think about that individual. This is a migrant. More often than not, it's a young mother with her child.
Although they pass that child around.
Well, I'm not going to dispute that. Yes, unfortunately, the child is more often than not a prop to play on our sympathies.
Right.
And so, again, it goes back to trying to build up trust with someone and getting them to see that in doing that is not necessarily going to be productive or in their best interests long term.
So don't buy candy, that's about the best we can do.
No, and they are just as entitled to the resources as anybody else in our community.
Okay, last question.
On the follow-up on this particular point, I understood from a prior part of the presentation that you perceive that someone or some group is actually driving people to locations in Oak Park, work this corner, and then we'll pick you up later, and that's, from my point of view, that's got to be, and we'll share what you get. As sort of an overseer of panhandlers who profit from the panhandlers' effort. And I don't, is there a way to identify who are the people who are bringing them in, and is there any manner in which the law can have an impact on those people whose business is bring panhandlers to Oak Park?
Sure. So that aspect of this is larger than the Oak Park Police Department.
I imagine.
Yes, and, for us to be able to identify those individuals is one thing. For us to be able to take some sort of an enforcement action, again, that becomes a larger issue, larger than the Oak Park Police Department. And it goes to the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, and then also our society in general, and how we want to approach this issue.
Okay.
I can just briefly share that, this is where, getting something done at any level of government is about communication, advocacy, and then putting money behind it. So first of all, there are organizations out there that also primarily serve a migrant community, and we can give money there, okay? But as Deputy Chief Jacobson said, all of our local nonprofits are also able to legally assist those same migrants. So the constant advocacy to our governor and to our Dick Durbin and Danny Davis, those who have kind of that federal influence to advance immigration reform, we need to put our pressure there. I'm the first village president in local modern history who's been able to sit down with the governor and who's been invited to the White House. I do lean on my long history when I'm in those moments for the dollars for the Village of Oak Park, but also so that they understand what the challenges are that we face. My only agenda when I met with Dick Durbin was that he understood our challenges and our successes around the migrant concerns. I also just want to remind folks though too, in case it's not immediately understood, the panhandlers at say 290 Expressway and other places, that operates as a business too, everybody. Okay, people are, they show up there at a certain time, they've got a schedule, they know when it's their shift or when it's someone else's turn. This is, yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here
Well,
this morning.
anyway, thank you. Thank you for all your efforts. Thank you for this morning, and thank you for all your efforts outside.
Thank you.